Hey guys, welcome back to Mo's Game Table. Today we're going to take a look inside the Doomsday Project Episode 1, The Battle for Germany. This is a game designed by Adam Starkweather and published by Compass Games. Everyone who watches this channel knows I love hypothetical World War III. So this is the start of a new series from Compass. This is Episode 1. There are multiple episodes planned. The second one is for the Balkan Front. So I'm real curious about this system. I went and picked up a copy of this. So let's take a look at the back of the box and see what this game's all about. The Doomsday Project is a series of interlocking games covering a world war that never was. It would spring up all over the globe, and this project will cover many different fronts and battles. The first game in the series will cover the massive attack by the combined Warsaw Pact forces against NATO in West Germany. The objective was to grab as much of the country as possible and destroy NATO and the bulk of the United States armed forces. The rest of the world would be there for the picking. Episode 1 of the series covers the battle for Germany at a scale of 12 kilometers a hex, with the armies of the Soviet Union represented by divisions and the NATO armies at the brigade level. Using the operational scale system, many new game design concepts and strategies are covered, offering both a visit to the past, but also a new and modern look at this conflict. You see there an example of the map and the counters. The components would get 3 22 by 34 inch maps, an 8.5 by 11 map, 5 counter sheets, 1 rulebook and several charts and tables, 2 10-sided dice and 2 6-sided dice. It is rated as a medium to high complexity. Each turn is 1 day. Map scale is 12 kilometers a hex. Unit scales are divisions and brigades. It is for 1 to 4 players. Solitaire suitability is high, and the average play time is from 2 to 50 hours for ages 14 and up. So let's take a look inside and see what you get. All right, we have our 2d6 and 2d10. Looks like some errata here, and errata counters as well. Whole bunch of player aids. Our rule book, and probably the playbook. Counter sheets that are shrink wrapped, and all of the maps. So let's set up the maps and take a closer look at the game. And we'll take a look at the maps that come with the game. There are 3 22 by 34 inch maps, and there is a 4th smaller map, which we'll take a look at here in a second. But first thing I want to tell you is don't panic. You don't need every map for every scenario. There's only one scenario that is going to require all the maps, and that's for the campaign scenario. The other scenarios, the 4 other scenarios that come with the game, you use 1 or 2 maps. So you won't need all the maps every time you play. Here, I just wanted to show you a segment at a time. The first one we're going to look at here is the Berlin map, and that is the small map here that you can use for the first scenario, the Battle of Berlin. Great thing about this, it's small, could fit on any table, and you can even take it with you on the road. So you just pack up your components, you pack up your map and the rules, and you can take it with you when you travel. So that's really good to have. So you can have World War III on the road. And then this is the North map section. As you can tell on the top left, they all are labeled. This is the North map, as I said. You've got Hamburg, Bremen, the Ruhr, all the way down to Bitterfeld, Potsdam, Brandenburg. So you've got a good section of area right here, and the maps are really beautiful. I think they're really well done. You get a lot of detail when you look down here as to the type of terrain there is. You got the rolling hills, you've got the forests, you've got the roads, you've got the rivers. And I think that's really cool that you can drill down and get that look here. Then we get to the central map, and this is where we get into a little bit more tighter terrain. You've got all these hills and forests right here, more so than you have in the north. Frankfurt in the center, Stuttgart down here on the bottom, and then we will go into the southern map. And then we have the southern map. You see Stuttgart here, Switzerland and Austria. So Stuttgart was on the central map as well. There's going to be overlap on these maps. That's why I wanted to lay out all 3 map sections together so you could see what it looks like when it's joined all as one map. And what you're going to do is you're going to overlay them, and you're going to have a little marker here that's going to tell you where to overlay them to. So you just throw the map down, you get to that point, and then you're good. You make your small little adjustments. I'm just moving it back and forth a little here, so it's not going to be 100% on, but you make your adjustments, and then you slap your plexi down, you're good to go. But this is what the overall map looks like when you join all 3 sections together. It does take up a lot of table space. It's about 58 inches or so. So if you have a big table, it's going to fit. If you can put a couple tables together, you can get it to fit. If not, you play it at a con, you'll definitely have table space there. But again, You only need this when you're playing the campaign game, not for every other scenario in the game. You have 4 scenarios. You're only going to use 2 maps in one. I think it is maybe two scenarios. The others are going to be all single map scenarios. So that's an overall look, though, at all 3 maps joined together. Next, we'll take a look at the player aids. We start off with the general game display. You have your turn track, weather track, refugees tracks, as well as the combat DRMs and support and victory point tracks at the bottom, and then the basic rules reference in the center. Then we have the NATO player aid, the NATO air display, the Warsaw Pact player aid, and then the Warsaw Pact air display. And lastly, we have the terrain effects chart, which gives you graphical representations of the different types of terrain on the map, along with the movement costs, the defensive value, and then all the modifiers depending on the type of unit that's fighting, as well as the special notes. And that continues on to the back side of the card. Next, we'll take a look at the counters that come with the game. On the left-hand side, we have U.S. forces. On the right-hand side, we have the West German forces. You're going to notice there's no numbers on these counters, not like we normally see where you have your attack, your defense, your movement, things like that. Instead, you will draw a combat chit, and that will give you DRMs that you'll be adding to the die rolls, along with some other DRMs that you're going to be adding that will give you the final outcome of the combat. On the next sheet, we have more NATO units: Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, the UK, and France on the right-hand side. Then we get to the Warsaw Pact units: Soviet forces on the left, East German, Czechoslovakian, and Polish forces on the right, along with some admin counters on the bottom right. The next sheet, we have more administrative counters, and these are the combat chits I was talking about. There's meeting engagement, prepared combat, hasty combat, and deliberate combat. So depending on the type of combat, based on your movement or the type of combat you're going to be in, you'll draw the combat chit from its appropriate cup. And on the final counter sheet, we have the remaining administrative counters for use during the game. Next, we'll take a look at the rules. This is a 47-page rulebook. The inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents, which lists out all the rules and their associated page numbers. Then we have the introduction, which gives you a little bit of a background as to what the setting is for the game. Then we have the game component, starts here with the map and continues on with the player aids, the different displays that you have, the counters, all that's explained to you here. Then we get to the counter abbreviations and game abbreviations, dice, sides, forces, conditions of forces, and then movement. Then we get to stacking, which is done a little differently in this game than we see in other games. Some games you may have maybe a 2 or 3 counter limit per hex. Here it's based on size points. And you can see this unit right here in these examples down here. You'll see this black circle with a number inside of it. In this instance, it's 6. Down here, it's 3. The max size limit you can have in a hex is 6. And that means only that unit can be in the hex. Here, you could have both of these units because they would equal up to 6. So that's how stacking works in this game. Then we have lines of communication, an example over here for lines of communication. We have zones of control, infrastructure and supply, control of hexes, random events, and then the turn structure is broken down for you, the sequence of play. Checking communications, your air allocation phase, resolving SSM attacks, supply and infrastructure phase, strategic air mission resolution, Warsaw Pact activation phase, and the NATO activation phase, as well as the headquarter activation segment, all explained to you. Unit activation segments, cadres, initial movement, and combat declaration segment. Because remember I said before, when it comes to combat, you're going to be using these chits that you're going to pull, and that's going to be based on your road movement, the types of movement you're doing, things like that, as well as the cost, because you have to pay movement costs to do different things. You see here, combat declaration cost table. For a meeting engagement, you have 1 movement point if cross-country, or half if you're in a road column. Hasty attack, 2 movement points if cross-country, or 1 in a road column. Prepared attack is 3 movement points if cross-country, 2 if in a road column, and a deliberate attack is all your movement points, and you may not be in a road column. So movement and a type of movement you're using is one of the considerations you're going to have to make when you're going to be going into the attack. You're not just going to move your units across the map and start attacking. Here you've got to think through the different types of movement that you're going to be using. Reserve movement segment, bonus movement segment, and then we have the combat all explained to you, broken down like we were talking about just now with the combat chits. It explains all that to you here. Then you have the different types of NATO tanks that you have, and IFV APCs, and then the same for the Warsaw Pact. Then we have the meeting engagement, hasty attack, prepared attack, deliberate attack, all those combat shits we were talking about. That's explained to you here. Helicopter support, the combat die rolls. This is all still your combat segment. Then we have the after combat loss segment. Then you have your headquarters movement and refresh segment, bivouac, and then the end phase. And then we get on to the time phase. You have your supply, all that's handled there. And then there's the air game explained to you, because the air game on this sounds pretty involved from what I've heard. And it'll be a nice little interesting subsection of the game, being that generally just air is kind of something you allocate as far as for a lot of games to add maybe a column shift or a modifier, things like that. Here, you're going to have your own separate air game. Then we have morale, headquarters and cadres, then your different types of markers that you'll be using in the game. Those are all explained to you here. Your air game markers, combat markers, special units, refugees. Then you have your reinforcements and replacements, transport support, engineer support, nuclear weapons support, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear weapons and chemical weapons are handled here. And then we have French entry into the war, French restrictions after entering the war, and then some counter errata as well as the game credits on the final page. And then on the back of the rule book, we have the expanded sequence of play. Next, we'll take a look at the scenario book. This is a 39-page full-color book. Inside of the front cover, we have the table of contents, which lists out all the different scenarios and their associated page numbers. We start off with the Battle for Berlin. That's that small map we looked at before. Gives you your introduction, preparation for play, setting up, your orders of battle, the track setup, and then the special rules for the battle. Then we get to Scenario 2, which is the Battle for the Folded Gap. Same setup. It's going to explain to you what section that you're going to be using, what map. There's your order of battle. Then we get to Scenario 3, the Battle for Northag. Gives you your order of battle, the equipment that's going to be used, and then the reinforcements, the order of arrival, just like we saw in Scenario 2. Then we get to Scenario 4, the Battle for Centag. This is going to be 2 maps. Order of battle, your air display, special rules. Then we get to Scenario 5, which is the Battle for Germany. As you can see here, it's going to use all of the maps, all 4 of the maps. Here's your order of battle, giving you everything you need to set up the campaign game and play through it. And then we get to the example of play, and it's telling you here OSS will return with Test of Faith, the Yom Kippur War, which is the next game in the OSS series, which this is a part of. Then we get to the extended example of play here that's going to break down an example of play with not only text, but the supporting images as well. I missed one of the pages there. So you can follow along and understand the play. You can just put out the counters along with this and follow along, or just read through it and understand the flow of the play. And then there is the planning map on the back of the scenario book. And that is a look at everything you get inside of the Doomsday Project, Episode 1, The Battle for Germany. This is a game designed by Adam Starkweather and published by Compass Games. Well, anyone who knows me or watches the channel knows that anything modern or hypothetical World War III is right up my alley. So this one was on my radar for a while, and that I've been playing NATO, and I really enjoy the heck out of that. So this one definitely moved up to the top of the queue as far as next acquisition. And I'm not familiar with the OSS system, so this is going to be something new. But looking through the rules, I was really excited by what I'm seeing. I like the idea that you've got to take your movement points and use them not just for movement allocation, but for combat as well. And depending on the type of movement you're using, how much it's going to cost you for the type of combat you want to get into. Then the combat shits add some variability, which I think is pretty neat, because that gives you that friction, that fog of war aspect that really makes combat always a question. And I think that's kind of neat to explore. So I'm looking forward to checking this one out and seeing how that works out. And then on top of that, you have this big, beautiful map, but you don't always have to use the entire thing. You can use it in sections. You can play the Berlin map, you can play the different segments of the map, or you can just use, say, 2 for the scenarios as well. So not every game is going to be the entire map, but obviously you want to build yourself up to it. Start off with the small Berlin map and then do the single map scenarios. And then once you've got enough experience with the system, you can then play the entire campaign, which is going to be really cool. And I'm looking forward to checking that one out. Well, I hope that helps you guys out if you've been curious about this one. You have any comments or questions, post them down below. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you next time.